in the quiet hush of twilight, when the day has softened its colors and the world seems to hold its breath, a gentle story begins. Not far from a forest where the wind sings through the trees and the stars begin to blink awake, there is a small village where the people live simply. Their days are filled with the rhythm of the earth, planting, harvesting, caring for one another, and their nights are devoted to stillness. On one such evening, an old monk named Ananda returned to the village after a journey through many towns. His robes were worn, his steps slow but steady, and in his eyes glowed a peace that seemed untouched by the noise of the world. The children ran to greet him, the elders bowed, and the villagers gathered as they always did when he returned, eager not just to see him, but to hear a story. Ananda, the devoted disciple of the Buddha, carried not just teachings, but a presence that soothed like water over stone. That night, under a sky painted with stars, the people sat around him. Mothers rocked their babies, farmers rested their calloused hands on their knees, and children curled beside their parents. All of them waited for Ananda to speak, knowing that whatever he said would guide their dreams into peaceful places. With a deep, steady breath, Ananda began to speak. "There was a night, long ago," he said, "when the Buddha walked alone beneath the moonlight. He had been teaching in a nearby village and chose not to sleep in a house that evening. Instead, he wandered into the forest, drawn by the silence, by the song of the night wind, and the feeling of being fully present beneath the stars. His voice was soft, like the rustling of leaves. As he walked, he came upon a young man sitting by himself near a fire, his shoulders hunched and eyes clouded with sorrow. The Buddha approached him not with words, but with silence, and sat nearby. The fire crackled between them, and for a while, neither spoke. The villagers listened with open hearts, letting the story wash over them. Their breaths slowed. The air around them, cool and still, felt somehow sacred. Ananda continued. The young man, feeling the warmth of the Buddha's presence, finally spoke. "I cannot sleep," he said. "My heart is heavy with guilt and regret. My mind races with things I have done and things I failed to do. I feel like I don't deserve peace." The Buddha looked at him, not with judgment, but with boundless compassion. He said, "My friend, even the darkest night cannot extinguish the light of your heart. You suffer not because you are broken, but because you have forgotten your own goodness." At this, some villagers closed their eyes. Others held their hands to their hearts. Ananda's words were not just a story, they were medicine. The Buddha then invited the young man to breathe. Just to breathe, Ananda whispered, slowly, kindly, without needing to change anything. Feel the rise and fall of your chest, the Buddha said. That is the rhythm of life that has never abandoned you. Feel the warmth in your hands. That is the compassion that still lives within you. As Ananda paused, a breeze passed through the village square. It rustled the trees and lifted the lantern flames gently, as if blessing the story. The young man wept, Ananda said softly. Not out of pain, but because someone saw his pain without trying to fix it. The Buddha offered no advice, no solution, only presence, only love. And in that loving presence, the young man fell asleep under the stars, resting not just his body, but his soul. Ananda looked at the villagers now, their eyes reflecting the firelight and the stars. Each of us has a night like that, he said. A night when we sit alone with our regrets, believing we are beyond healing. But the Buddha's compassion reminds us, no one is too lost to be found, too broken to be whole, too tired to be held. He placed his palms together, bowed his head, and said, "Tonight, may you sleep as that young man did, cradled in the arms of compassion." The villagers stayed quiet, not out of silence, but reverence. Then slowly, one by one, they stood, bowed, and returned to their homes. Children already asleep in their parents' arms, old men walking more slowly, but with lighter hearts. And above them, the stars shimmered on, as if the story itself had lit the sky. The night deepened. A gentle breeze carried the scent of lotus blossoms from the nearby pond. Stars flickered above, whispering the silent truths of the cosmos. In the quietude of the village, where the story of the compassionate Buddha lingered in every ear, hearts began to soften. Sleep hadn't come yet, but the mind had slowed its pace. A sacred stillness filled the air. The elder monk, Ananda, remained seated beneath the old Bodhi tree, his eyes gently closed, hands resting in his lap, not in meditation, but in a quiet presence that radiated peace. Around him, villagers remained awake, drawn into a space where time no longer rushed. They were no longer waiting for answers. They were simply here. Then Ananda opened his eyes slowly and spoke again, not loudly, but as if addressing each person's heart directly. "There is a story the Blessed One told me," he said, voice soft like morning mist. A story of a woman who had lost everything, yet found in her loss the key to unshakable peace. He paused, letting the silence between words become part of the teaching. She was called Kisagotami, a mother, young and full of life, until her only child fell ill and died in her arms. Gasps were not heard, but the collective breath seemed to pause. Everyone knew what it meant to lose. Even those who had not yet tasted death had known the ache of letting go. She carried the child's body from house to house, Ananda continued, begging for medicine, pleading with anyone who would listen. Her eyes wild with desperation, her heart crushed by the weight of clinging. One of the villagers, a mother holding her sleeping baby, clutched the child a little tighter. Finally, someone told her, "Go to the Buddha. He has the medicine you seek." Ananda smiled gently, and so she came, her feet bleeding, her hands trembling. "Master, please, heal my child." And the Buddha, in infinite compassion, said, "Yes, daughter, but first, bring me a handful of mustard seeds from any house where no one has lost a loved one." The villagers understood. They knew what came next. Kisagotami ran to the first house, then the next, then another. But in each, there was loss. A father, a sister, a husband, a child. Death had touched them all. No house was untouched by sorrow. The night felt deeper now, as if the stars had leaned in to listen more closely. And slowly, she began to see. Her pain was not hers alone. Her suffering was shared, universal. She returned to the Buddha, not with mustard seeds, but with empty hands and an open heart. Ananda's voice dropped to a whisper, and in that moment, she awakened. She saw impermanence not as punishment, but as the gentle hand of life inviting her to let go. And from then on, she followed the path not as a grieving mother, but as one who understood the law of life and death. A soft exhale rose among the listeners, like the breath of a long forgiven sorrow. No one spoke. Yet something had shifted. Ananda looked up at the night sky. We suffer because we hold on to what must pass. And yet, letting go does not mean forgetting. It means holding with tenderness and releasing with grace. He folded his hands in his lap again, eyes now closed. If you wish to sleep in peace, do not seek to silence your thoughts. Let them come like wind through the trees. Let them pass like clouds over the moon. Do not grasp. Do not push away. Just rest in the middle. The villagers sat in stillness, some with eyes closed, some with tears, some simply breathing. The story had not ended. It had become a part of them. That night, many slept, not because the world had changed, but because their hearts had softened. Not because the pain had vanished, but because compassion had entered, like a quiet guest who needs no words. The night was quiet, yet within the silence, life moved in subtle ways. A bamboo leaf fluttered with the breeze. A small lizard scurried over a stone. Somewhere far, an owl called into the darkness. These tiny sounds, once unnoticed, now seemed to harmonize with the rhythm of the heart, a heart that was learning not just to beat, but to feel, to listen. The villagers were no longer merely hearing stories. They were entering them. The boundaries between the tale and the listener had softened, as if the teachings of the Buddha were not just about ancient times, but were blooming quietly in their own lives here, now. Ananda spoke again, his voice like a soft bell in the distance, calling one home. "Do you know," he began, "that even the Buddha himself once struggled with restlessness?" A few heads lifted, surprised. "Yes," he nodded. "Before his great awakening, Siddhartha sat under the Bodhi tree, night after night, seeking the truth. But the mind is a river, it runs fast, especially when we want peace. Memories rise, regrets, hopes, desires. The more we try to stop them, the stronger they become." He paused, allowing the image to form clearly. The Buddha realized something. He did not try to dam the river. He sat beside it, quietly. He watched the current without clinging. He let it flow. Ananda breathed slowly, as though reliving the moment. And that is how stillness came, not by forcing silence, but by understanding the nature of the mind. A young man in the crowd shifted his posture, his chest softening. An elderly woman closed her eyes, resting her hands gently over her heart. "When we lie awake at night," Ananda continued, "we often wrestle with thoughts. We try to silence them. But peace does not come from control. It comes from compassion. What if, instead of fighting your thoughts, you simply welcomed them? What if every restless memory was just a child knocking at your door?" He smiled gently. "Would you scold that child? Or would you kneel down and listen?" A deep hush filled the air. The villagers weren't just listening, they were remembering parts of themselves. "The Buddha taught," Ananda said, "that we do not need to fix every thought. We do not need to win against the mind. We need only to understand that every thought, like every wave, will rise and pass." The stars seemed to nod in agreement. "Let your breath be your boat," he whispered. "Let your body rest on the riverbank, and let your thoughts be the current flowing by. You are not the water. You are the stillness watching it." One child had already fallen asleep in her mother's lap, her tiny breath rising and falling like a soft tide. A farmer gently rubbed his tired hands together, as if releasing decades of unspoken sorrow. Somewhere, a candle flickered steady, alive, quiet. Ananda folded his hands once more. "Compassion," he said, "is not only for others. It begins here, with a heart that dares to be kind to itself." And with that, the night deepened, not darker, but softer, like a hand wrapping the soul in warmth. The teachings did not end. They entered the room like the wind, without effort, without demand, and yet filling everything. And as the villagers slowly laid down, some on mats, some on the earth, they were not trying to sleep. They were resting in the arms of compassion, knowing that this night too was part of the path. The night grew deeper, not in darkness, but in depth, like a lake untouched by wind, mirroring the stars in its stillness. Inside the hall, the villagers remained silent. Some sat with eyes closed, others with hands folded gently in their laps. No one stirred. There was no need to. The words they heard had become seeds, and something sacred was unfolding within. Ananda's voice rose again, low and warm. "There was a woman once," he began, "who came to the Buddha, carrying more grief than her body could hold. Her name was Kisa Gotami." Some nodded, others leaned in closer. "Her child had died," he said softly, "and her sorrow had no end. She walked from house to house, carrying the lifeless child in her arms, asking if anyone had medicine that could bring him back." He paused. They turned her away, or they wept with her, but no one could offer the cure she sought. At last, someone told her about the Buddha. The firelight flickered, reflecting in the quiet eyes of the listeners. She came to the Buddha and begged him for help. "Please, give me medicine to bring my child back." And the Buddha, with the deepest compassion, told her, "Bring me a mustard seed from a home that has never known loss. Only then can I help you." He looked around the room, his gaze gentle and steady. So she searched. She knocked on many doors, and at each home she asked, "Have you ever known loss?" And in every place, the answer was the same. "Yes, we have lost a child, a parent, a friend." Ananda let silence do its sacred work. Kisa Gotami returned with no mustard seed, but she came back with understanding. Her grief had not vanished, but it had transformed. No longer alone in her pain, she placed the child down and wept not from despair, but from awakening. She had seen the truth of life, that suffering touches us all. A soft wind stirred the curtain, like a sigh from the trees. "We all carry wounds," Ananda said, "and we all carry guilt, things we wish we had done or wish we had said differently. But the Buddha did not teach us to punish ourselves. He taught us to meet our pain with awareness and our mistakes with forgiveness." He paused, letting that truth fall like rain into the hearts of those listening. "If there is something in you that you have not forgiven," he said, "let this night be the beginning. Not to forget, but to release the chain. Not to erase the past, but to step out of its shadow." A mother clutched her shawl a little tighter. A young man looked down at his calloused palms. "Forgiveness is not weakness," Ananda said. "It is the courage to turn toward the wound and whisper, 'You no longer need to hurt me.'" He folded his hands. "Even the Buddha said, 'Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone.' And love begins with compassion for others, yes, but also for yourself." The villagers breathed slowly, as if their hearts had heard something they longed for. Outside, the moon rose gently, bathing the earth in silver calm. Inside, the night continued not as time passing, but as a sacred space widening, embracing every heart willing to listen. The night was now like a great silence draped across the village. Not the silence of absence, but the kind that gently holds everything, like a mother wrapping her child in a warm shawl. Inside the hall, some villagers had begun to lean on each other. A few elderly men rested their heads against the bamboo walls. The children had fallen asleep in their parents' laps, their breaths slow and deep. But Ananda continued. His voice, like the steady flow of a small river, invited even the weary heart to keep listening. "Before the Buddha was awakened," Ananda said, "he was a prince who had everything the world could offer. But deep inside, he knew there was something missing. He saw suffering, old age, sickness, and death, and he could not look away. He paused. So he left his palace, left his wife, left his newborn son. not out of coldness, but from the deepest love, the kind of love that seeks truth, not just comfort. He wandered through forests and sat under trees, asking questions no one else dared to ask. The villagers were quiet, as if their own lives were somehow being retold in that ancient story. He tried self-denial, Ananda continued. He fasted, meditated without rest, endured heat, cold, and hunger. But in the end, he realized that hurting himself did not bring him closer to wisdom. So he did something gentle. He accepted a bowl of milk rice from a kind girl named Sujata. And in that moment, something shifted. He stopped running from life. Ananda's voice became a whisper. The Buddha remembered the gentleness of his own heart, and that night he sat under the Bodhi tree and vowed, "I will not rise until I see the truth." The wind passed softly across the open windows, and it felt as if the forest beyond had leaned in to listen too. And he saw, Ananda said. He saw the nature of all things, how nothing stays the same, how clinging leads to suffering, and how peace is possible, not by controlling life, but by understanding it. A long silence followed. Then Ananda said, compassion was not something he added to himself. It was what remained when everything else fell away. A baby stirred, then returned to sleep. You see, he continued, we often try to be better by doing more, fixing ourselves, comparing ourselves to others. But the Buddha teaches, beneath all our fears, all our mistakes, all our burdens, there is already a softness. There is already love. He looked up, his eyes gentle. You don't have to become someone else to be whole. You only need to stop turning away from what is here. He let that truth rest in the air, like incense lingering after prayer. Tonight, if you feel tired of trying, he said softly, rest. If you feel ashamed, just breathe. If you're carrying guilt, place it down beside you like a heavy sack and look at it not to judge, but to understand. A woman wiped her eyes quietly. There is a place in you, Ananda said, that is untouched by pain, untouched by memory, a place beyond your name, beyond your age, beyond the story. That place is your true home. And then for a moment, he said nothing more. The only sound was the crickets outside, singing their gentle hymn to the night. The night deepened, and with it came a stillness that seemed to rise from the earth itself. There was something sacred in this hour, not because of its darkness, but because of its quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask anything of you. It simply allows you to be. Ananda noticed a child curled beside his father, a soft smile resting on the boy's lips. Perhaps he was dreaming of rivers or stars. Perhaps something in the Buddha's story had reached even his sleep. Ananda closed his eyes briefly and then continued. The Buddha often spoke of letting go not as a command, but as a gentle invitation. He said, clinging is the root of suffering. But he also knew that clinging is what humans do when they're afraid, when they're uncertain, when they long to feel safe. He let the words unfold slowly. Letting go is not about rejection, he said. It's not about pushing things away or pretending you don't care. It's the opposite. It's about allowing everything to be as it is without holding so tightly. A woman sitting by the entrance sighed softly, as if something inside her had just loosened. The Buddha taught that impermanence is not something to fear, but to embrace. Everything changes your thoughts, your body, your pain, your joy. Even your sorrow will one day turn to mist. Ananda turned his palms upward. When we hold too tightly, we suffer. But when we let life flow, something else appears. Space. And in that space, compassion blooms not because we tried to force it, but because there was room for it to grow. He smiled gently. Letting go is an act of love. You let go of what's heavy, not because you are careless, but because you care deeply about peace. Someone in the hall exhaled slowly, as if laying down a burden they had carried for years. You may think that if you release the past, you'll lose who you are. But the Buddha teaches that you are not your past. You are not your pain. You are the awareness that has always been here, watching, witnessing, loving. He looked at the sleeping children, then at the quiet faces of the villagers. Sometimes we hold on because we think we must. We think, if I let go of the sadness, I will forget who I loved. But no, letting go does not mean forgetting. It means loving without fear. The room was still. Even the candles flickered more gently now, as if responding to the softness in the air. Tonight, Ananda whispered, you can let go. Of the harsh words spoken long ago, of the guilt you've carried like a second skin, of the endless need to be perfect. Let go not into emptiness, but into kindness. Let go into the arms of compassion. He bowed his head slightly. And in this letting go, he said, you will find that you are not falling, you are resting. You are finally being held. The crickets outside sang quietly, like an unseen choir accompanying his final words. As the hush of night deepened, Ananda's voice softened like the sound of a gentle stream. The hall, dimly lit by the flickering oil lamps, had become a sanctuary, a sacred cocoon holding weary hearts. The villagers sat quietly, each breath drawing them closer to the stillness that was beginning to settle inside. The Buddha once told me, Ananda began gently, that true peace arises not only from meditation, but from forgiveness, not just forgiveness of others, but of ourselves. A man in the back lowered his gaze. So many of us, Ananda continued, carry regrets like stones in our hearts, harsh words spoken, moments when fear made us act unkindly, choices we wish we could erase. He paused, letting the weight of those truths settle among them. But the Buddha never judged anyone for their past. He looked at each person as they were, right now in this moment, without needing them to be different. He said, you are not the sum of your mistakes. You are the light that sees those mistakes with understanding. A silence filled the room, like warm water filling a bowl. To forgive, Ananda said, is to stop punishing yourself. It is to say, I made a mistake, and I vow to be more mindful. But I will no longer wound myself for what cannot be undone. A few villagers wiped their eyes silently. Forgiveness, he added, doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering with tenderness. It means seeing the frightened part of you that didn't know better and offering it compassion instead of blame. The wind outside picked up slightly, rustling through the trees like a mother's lullaby. The Buddha taught us that everything we hold onto anger, shame, guilt becomes part of the story we repeat in our minds. But what if tonight you could set the story down? What if you could breathe into the places that hurt and whisper, I forgive you. I understand. You were doing your best. Ananda's eyes glimmered in the lamplight. We often think that if we forgive, we're saying that what happened was okay. But that's not true. Forgiveness is not saying the pain didn't matter. It's saying, I choose to heal. His voice became almost a whisper. He looked around at the faces that now held both sorrow and hope. Tonight, he said, if there is someone you need to forgive, maybe it is yourself. Do it softly, not as a duty, but as a gift. Let the night carry your pain into the stars, where it will become part of something greater. The oil lamps flickered gently, and the air in the hall felt lighter, like something unseen had been released. Ananda looked up at the moon that now hung low in the sky, a silver eye watching over the world. Its light pooled quietly on the floor of the hall like a gentle breath from the heavens. The villagers sat wrapped in blankets, their eyes closed or half open, breathing in rhythm with his words. The night had grown still, as if even the trees had paused to listen. "There is a kind of release," Ananda said, "that does not come with effort, but with surrender, a quiet allowing, like how the leaf, yellowed by time, does not resist the wind when it is ready to fall." He let the words settle like mist. "So much of our suffering," he continued, "comes from clinging not only to people, but to memories, identities, even our pain. We grip so tightly, thinking if we let go, we will lose ourselves. But the Buddha taught that letting go is not losing, it is returning." Someone stirred in the back. A mother, perhaps, who had held too much for too long. "The Buddha once told a story of a traveler," Ananda said. "This traveler came upon a river he needed to cross. He built a raft from reeds and vines. It carried him safely to the other side. But then he clung to the raft, unwilling to leave it behind. He forgot the raft had served its purpose. Wouldn't it be foolish," the Buddha asked, "to carry the raft on your back when the path ahead is dry land?" He smiled gently, eyes twinkling. "Many of us are carrying old rafts' thoughts, habits, wounds. They once helped us survive, but now they only weigh us down." He paused again. "What are you still carrying, dear ones? What are you holding on to that has already served its purpose?" The villagers were silent. Some lowered their heads. Others closed their eyes. "Tonight, let the darkness be your river," Ananda said. "Let it carry away the weight you no longer need. You do not have to force it. You only have to be willing." A breath moved through the hall like a collective sigh. "Letting go," he whispered, "is not a single act. It is a way of being, a practice of loosening the hand around what hurts, a quiet trust that something else will carry you, that life, in its great compassion, will not let you fall." The moonlight touched his face like a blessing. "Rest now," he said, his voice like a lullaby. "Let your mind uncoil. Let your heart soften. You are safe to let go." Outside, the wind had stilled. The night wrapped itself around the hall like a shawl of silence and stars. In the stillness that followed, Ananda remained seated, unmoving, as though he too was resting in the breath of the present. No need to hurry, no need to explain. He had learned from years beside the Blessed One that some truths do not need to be understood, they only need to be felt. After some time, he spoke again, softly, as if not to disturb the quiet that had become sacred. "There is a place within you," he said, "where nothing has ever been harmed, a place untouched by grief, unshaken by fear." The Buddha called it Citta, the heart mind, not the thinking mind, always comparing, judging, longing, but the gentle, awakened heart, radiant with compassion. He let that word echo, compassion. "Compassion is not something we must earn or perform," Ananda continued. "It is not a prize for the good or the strong. It is our nature. It is what remains when we are no longer trying to be someone else." Someone began to weep quietly in the back. It was not a sobbing, but a release, as though an old knot had come undone. Ananda bowed his head toward the sound. "The Buddha once said," he continued, "when we truly understand suffering, we do not become bitter. We become kind." The fire in the lamp flickered gently, casting shadows that danced on the wooden floor. "You do not have to be perfect," Ananda said. You do not need to fix everything before you can rest. You are worthy of peace not someday, but now. Not if, but because. Because you are alive. Because your heart still beats. Because there is still light in you, even when you forget. He smiled. When you lie down tonight, let yourself fall not into sleep, but into kindness. Let your final thought not be one of worry, but of mercy. Mercy for yourself, mercy for the little child you once were, mercy for all the ways you've tried so hard and still hurt. He placed his hands on his lap and closed his eyes. In the silence of the night, may you remember who you are. Not your failures, not your fears, but your capacity to love. May your breath return you to the gentle heart. The hall was utterly quiet now. The villagers rested not just in their bodies, but in their being. Some leaned on each other. Some simply sat, eyes closed, listening to the wind that had returned, soft as a lullaby, passing through the leaves like a mother's hand brushing the forehead of her sleeping child. The night had grown deep, its silence like a warm blanket draped across the village. The stars above shimmered with a clarity only seen in moments of great stillness. Ananda opened his eyes and looked at the faces before him, some asleep in their sitting posture, others gazing quietly, eyes wide open with something more than just sight. Perhaps wonder, perhaps grace. He spoke, not loudly, but with the softness of someone saying goodbye at the threshold of dawn. You have listened, not just with your ears, but with your hearts. This is the greatest way to honor the Dhamma. Let it enter you like the breath enters the body effortlessly, naturally. Let it soften you, not sharpen. Let it open what was once closed. He paused. The Buddha's teachings are not meant to be admired, like jewels on a shelf. They are meant to be lived. And that life begins, not tomorrow, but in this moment, when you are willing to greet yourself as you are. A few heads nodded slowly. The room had become more than a space. It had become a sanctuary, a place where no one needed to be anything other than human. Ananda stood, slowly, as though rising with the earth. He looked toward the oil lamp that now burned low. When the Buddha was asked, "What is the essence of your teaching?" he replied with just a few words, "Do no harm. Cultivate goodness. Purify the heart." He looked at them once more. "It is not too late for you. It never was. You do not need to earn compassion. You only need to return to it." Outside, the breeze carried the scent of morning wet grass, distant flowers, the coming light. A rooster crowed softly from a neighboring home, signaling that time would soon resume its ordinary rhythm. But something in the villagers had changed. Though their world would return to routine, their hearts had been stirred, like still water touched by a gentle hand. Ananda gave one last bow. May you sleep in compassion, and may you wake not just rested, but reborn. With that, he walked into the night, robe fluttering like a whisper, dissolving into the dark, yet somehow leaving more light behind than he took with him.